Welcome to Story Players. This is your video game time capsule from the perspective of people who make and play video games. And I am Zachary Snader, your co-host as always, and I am joined by my good friend, Buddy Powell. What's up, buddy?
Yo.
That was a lot better, huh?
Yeah, good job.
We're doing great, man.
For people who are listening, that was the third take. It was the best one, believe it or not.
It was the best one. That was solid.
I don't know how many episodes we're in, but we're getting better every time. I can say that much.
We are.
I don't want to put all the onus on you because I've done my fair share of crappy.
Yeah, you've gotten better. I've gotten worse, so
talks.
it evens out. We're staying. The bar of quality is remaining the same.
It's okay. People are here for it. They're here for the antics.
Of course.
Of the boys.
All right. So last week you talked about video game preservation for roughly an hour, which was great because.
Right, we only did one, so I guess I owe you the floor this time.
Yeah, I
just
will.
Did mine.
Yes, you must cede your time on the floor, Senator, and pass it over to me. And
sure.
Yeah, okay. So
what's on your mind?
I have two things that I really want to talk about, but I'm going to decide right now in this moment to talk about money.
Oh,
we're going to talk about money.
Cold hard money.
Cold hard money in video games.
But I thought this was about games. Oh, okay.
Have you heard? Here's the history of the United States corridor in 16. No, yeah, I want to talk about money in video games because, well, for a few reasons. One, money in video games is super freaking weird right now. It's a weird thing. I have been thinking about money a lot because I need it and because I'm trying to raise it for our studio. And I've also been talking with a lot of other studio founders and companies like in and around games that are not necessarily developers that have also been working on raising money and are directly impacted by all the things that are happening in the games industry fiscal landscape. Largely people who are victim to the massive universe of bullshit that we have found ourselves encompassed in.
All the monetization tactics and games as a service and is that what you're talking about? Or just charging?
Sure. And also like layoffs and how studios have been impacted and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I guess the business side. But that does directly tie into game design as well. Like, dude, I keep a browser window open when we do our thing. And I always keep gamesindustry.biz as the default, just like as a little inspiration. And Lars, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Wingafors from Embracer is yet again on the front page of gi.biz.
Oh, Embracer Group, the ones who are doing the opposite of embracing things.
Dude. The headline is Embracer's Lars Wingafors on the brutal truth of the AAA market. CEO also discusses the possibility of raising the price of games to combat increasing development costs. And look, like I haven't read the article, but I've read enough of what he's talked about to like understand their ethos generally.
Where he's coming from,
yeah. Just like, dude, that's the fucking polar opposite direction that we as an industry need to go in right now. Like it's such an insane. We are living in this like actually kind of insane, like by definition, time in the games industry, where these, there's this bifurcation between AAA and indie, just to try to easily box these things in. But that split, that's sort of grown over the last, I don't know, decade, 15 years, right? That gap has widened considerably, right? And I'm sure a lot of people are aware of this, of like Spider-Man 2 having a $200 million budget or whatever. all these like big AAA games having 8-9 figure budgets now, to then say the solution is to charge more for games, like, dude, you're not looking at the root of the problem.
That's the Western medicine mentality. That's like putting the Band-Aid over it instead of solving like the root of it. And that kind of reminds me of what we were talking about last week, where we don't squeeze every last drop out of the technology we create anymore. Like every month there's a new update for Unreal that I would argue no one needs, but everyone wants. And I think everyone wants better graphics and bigger games and more playtime. I wouldn't say everyone, I guess, because it's just kids that want more playtime. The adults, they want less playtime. But like we don't utilize these tools. They're just growing and growing and growing because that demand is always there for better and better and better, more realistic. And it's getting to the point where I see it as like no longer possible to sustain. And I think that's kind of where you're heading, where it's like, this isn't sustainable. The market isn't sustainable either. It's just like people demanding higher and higher quality where there's no way to do it other than just expanding budgets of things. Like they were talking about on Digital Foundry recently about Senua's Sacrifice, the new Hellblade. Is that the new one, Senua's Sacrifice?
Yep. Senua's Saga is the new one.
Okay, yeah. The new one, it's, I guess in scope is quite small because it is just a story-driven experience. Yeah. Lacking a lot of gameplay, but it is the highest fidelity thing you can see coming out on Unreal 5 right now. And the switch on that, like the rub to that is there's only so much 80 people or 100 people can do to make a game look and play like people expect. When the bar is being set so high all the time. Like it's basically like they were saying on Digital Foundry that it's reaching levels like of pre-rendered CG from like movies, like cinematic CG. And because of that, obviously there's a trade-off. Like they had to scope it differently. It doesn't even reach the same level of scope in gameplay as the first one, and the first one was already pretty limited. And yeah, so like we're seeing this like kind of apex of what humans are capable of doing with their time and money, regardless of how convenient the tools are. The tools, they can get us like to I wouldn't say we're ever going to reach reality. I think we can always get to cinematic. Reality is something that comes with all these different caveats, and I think it involves more than just looking nice. But we're getting cinematic realism, and we're there. And we're seeing that it costs this much, it requires this much time, and okay, so where was I even going with that? Basically, back to what I was saying before, is just like, I feel like we're kind of putting the tracks in front of the train as it's going. Is that how the phrase goes?
Yeah.
The track before the cart, or whatever, the horse before the cart. We're like, sure, it's cutting edge, but it's not, you can't make a game look like that and be like this incredible open world 100-hour experience like people expect. You just can't do it and have all this quality and stuff. And it just is unsustainable. But because it's the taste is already in the mouth of people, like we've gotten a taste for it, the public, they expect bigger and better things every time. And that's also just the nature of the games industry, is it's always getting better and better and better. And the bad side of that, the bad edge to that sword is, we can't really keep up unless we inflate the prices, or we kind of lower expectations. Like people look at indie games whose budgets are reasonable, the scope is reasonable, the amount of people working on them is reasonable. It's all reasonable. It works. It makes fun stuff, but you don't get that shock value of like, wow, it's the most realistic looking game. So I think we're kind of like, we've chosen, the industry has chosen the path of cinematic realism over just making fun stuff anymore. And that comes with like movie cinematic equivalent budgets. Like how much was Grand Theft Auto 5? And how much is Grand Theft Auto 6 going to cost? And how many people did it cost to make? You know, and is it like, can you really sell enough copies for $50 or $60 to pay for that game with the amount of people there are on Earth who want to play the game?
Yeah,
it's like it kind of reaches this like weird apex to where it's like you have at a certain point you either accept that your game can't be certain things, like you're gonna accept that the horse's balls can't rise in colder climates in Red Dead 2 for the price that
actually
you're shooting for.
okay, sorry,
Yeah. Or maybe I'm thinking of Metal Gear Solid, but I think there's some game that has like horse ball stuff. I think Metal Gear Solid also has horse balls and poop
all right.
and stuff. Anyway, that was kind of ranty, wasn't it? But I mean, the point is like, yeah, laying the tracks in front of the train, where like we should really be focusing on making the best of the technology we already have, kind of like Nintendo does. I think Nintendo has a great, they use the stuff appropriately. Like their engines aren't cutting edge, but their game design is masterful, right? It's masterwork.
I mean,
and that kind of carries that company. Like they're never really going to be competing with Sony in cinematic stuff, but they're always going to be leading the game industry in actual gameplay. And they do it on budgets, and they do it on like engines that are like some of the games they release are on old ass engines. Some of the games they release are games that were finished years ago, and then they just found the right time to pull them out. So it's like they're doing stuff. They're really forethinking as far as like longevity of their name as a whole, because you don't expect ultimate realism from the next Nintendo game. People just want HD graphics. That's it. That's all they expect from Nintendo. I think that's a great example outside of indie games in the AAA space. I think Nintendo is a great example to look at. That's not slowly destroying itself. That's not riding off the tracks with every release.
Yeah, I mean, Nintendo certainly, they push the bounds of their hardware to its limits. I would say to their detriment now, where they maybe get a little too comfortable with trying to extend the life cycle of something, where the design that they are actually trying to accomplish no longer fits within the bounds technically of what their hardware can provide.
Are you talking about like Wii stuff?
Yeah, I mean like Tears of the Kingdom specifically, like having frame rate issues on Switch, right? That's like that's an actual issue.
Right.
But neither here nor there. Like your underlying point, I totally agree with. Of Nintendo over-indexes on design and experience, and Masahiro Sakurai, right? Like his everything at the essence of what he does and talks about is creating entertaining experiences for players, which is why Nintendo makes great games, is because their priority is to create fun and compelling games. And I'm sure Ninja Theory set out to make a great game. Were they trying to make a fun game? I don't really know. I think they just wanted to like create something that was eye-catching and carried on the story. But like you were saying, right, with that being the scope, does that actually lead? Like, this is the fundamental question. Does that actually lead to a great experience? And at least in the case of Senua's Saga, my understanding from, I haven't played it, but just from hearing about it, it seems like that actually worked to their detriment. Because I think a really good parallel to Senua's Saga is God of War Ragnarok, where another like super high fidelity, massive scope game that also took, like Senua's Saga took 6+ years to develop, right? And of course, like the development of games is going to be lagging behind the technology, so you're going to be leveraging like old tools and new tools and figuring out how to make all that work. I mean, maybe that's why it looks great, but also it took just as much time as Ragnarok did, and Ragnarok sold bonkers, like still looks incredible even on older consoles. Do players need more than that? Like, I don't know. And then
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and then you even have Sony being like, yeah, this game cost, however many tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to make. And like they were placing the same bet. That's the wild thing. Is A, they were placing the same bet, and B, that bet is so massive to begin with. Like, no wonder Microsoft and Xbox are faltering is because that, like, copying that strategy is just like is fucking stupid. Not to judge the leadership there. I'm sure they have way more insight, and I know they have infinitely more expertise than I do. But just outside looking in, it looks dumb as hell to think that any of this is tenable, because even Sony is standing on shaky ground right now. And you have quotes like from Lars Fingerfors saying that, like, yeah, we're going to have to increase the cost of these games. Like, what are all of you doing? Like, truly, what the hell are all of you doing? Like,
they're chasing the carrot on the stick.
Dude, but this carrot is like, I don't know. I guess. I suppose they're chasing this carrot on the stick, but I think when players are not receptive to these experiences, you have to look at the idea of what the experience is and be like, is this even the right type of thing that we're trying to make? Like, just make a movie at that point. Or I don't know.
Yeah, actually,
why?
Like, talking of movies, speaking of movies, actually, I was thinking about that while you're talking. Is like, the movie industry is huge, right? But it got to this point over decades and decades. It's been growing for so long because in the movie sphere, innovation comes at such a low cost. Like, we can get more HD, film or whatever. You can get better cameras. You can get 3D. You can do all that stuff. But like, all these advances came so late in the game. Like, we're just now seeing like this heavy use and good use of like CGI. And we're seeing, we're no longer seeing like 3D movies anymore, but still, like, that innovation technology happened over so many decades, and it was such a slow growth. Whereas games, because it is a technology focused art form, it exploded. Like, technology is fast. It grows exponentially. And I think we're seeing games grow exponentially because of that. So it's not going in the course of like decades like movies were. Like, we don't really see innovation in the way movies are made anymore, at least not in the fundamentals. Whereas like the fundamentals of games, how they're sold and how they're produced is always changing. Like, it's such a trendy, shifting thing. I'm not in the movie industry, but from the outside looking in, you can see the basics of it and how it's working. Like, we understand how movies are made. Whereas like games are moving so fast all the time. And the technology is advancing with computer technology, which is already something that's exponentially getting better all the time. I think, kind of, to put an imagery to it, it's getting swept up in that current. The production of games, video games are getting swept up in that current of evolving technology in this exponential way. And maybe that's like, this is a side effect of that, is just like people trying to keep up, trying to keep their heads above that water, and they're having to spend money and spend resources on all that stuff. And it's just, no one really knows what they're doing. No one really knows what's going to happen. No one knows what's going to explode next. So people are putting their bets on the safest things they can think of. And I think we've found that Sony likes the cinematic stuff. Nintendo likes the gameplay, family-centric stuff. And Xbox really feels kind of lost at this point in between these worlds. I don't really have a lot to say about Xbox personally because I don't follow them that much. But it definitely feels like you said, Sony's struggling. I don't quite see how. Maybe like just because they're chasing this same carrot. But Xbox is like, we're seeing the bricks actually starting to crumble on Xbox. Whereas I don't quite see that with Sony just yet. But it is like you can see it coming.
I mean, it's
because they're chasing the same carrot.
It comes down to this idea that you talked about of like the safe bets, right? The bets that were once considered safe. Like, I bet Senua Saga would have once been considered a safe bet, right? Like, massive cinematic action story. We've gotten, I mean, I guess like games like God of War kind of set the stage for that to be accessible to a large consumer base. But they're not anymore. Like, it's still working for Sony because they have tentpole franchises that they can lean on. And they have these like world-class studios that are making new IPs for them. Like Guerrilla, right, who made Horizon Zero Dawn. The game they made before that was Killzone Shadowfall. And that was after Killzone 1, 2, and 3. And Shadowfall like did not knock it out of the park for them. So I'm sure Sony would have thought that was a safe bet. but maybe or actually there was a whole no clip documentary about how they kind of transitioned from Shadowfall to Zero Dawn. But like, was that like a last shot thing for Guerrilla? Was it like, okay, hey, maybe we actually do need to try something different? And then, sure enough, they do something different, and it pans out for them, right? And this is kind of the crux of where this whole like split of direction thing and the money comes in, because things like Zero Dawn, really worked out for Sony. Things like Redfall did not work out for Xbox. And like, it's great that they both tried to do those things. Redfall maybe less so because of what they were trying to like do from a design standpoint just wasn't very compelling. But the idea that they were willing to like take these shots was great. Could they have done both of those things in much, much smaller scoped packages though? And this is sort of the whole point, is like these studios over and over again, if they keep taking these big bets and missing, things are going to fall apart, like with Xbox. Even Sony isn't guaranteed to just have hits come out all the time just because they're Sony and just because they have this pedigree. So what happens like if Sony puts $100 million into a game and it flops, right? Like Spider-Man 2 was barely even considered a success at a $200 million budget. It's really interesting to me that the direction that AAA publishers and developers have decided to go is, rather than taking a step back and rethinking their core strategy, they are instead just pressing the gas pedal all the way through the floor and just being like, fuck it, full send. Like this needs to work. We're going to cut out everything that we can to save money, but we're not actually going to shift course whatsoever. We're still going to make these massive games. And at some point it's like, do you even see why you're undergoing this death by 1,000 cuts? You're just like, fuck it. Like, I don't care if I'm being cut. Like, I'm just going to keep on pedal to the metal. Like, let's go.
It makes me think of like a big sail ship, and to go faster, they're just throwing out all the food and stuff.
Yes. That is a very,
all the people,
all the
to go faster.
All the people that like hoist the sails. And then you have the captain at the end after he's like told everyone to jump off the ship. And he's like, oh, what happened?
Wait a minute, where's me boy? Where's me cabin
my
boy?
food in my cabin, sir? Yeah, man. So that's kind of how it feels like it's going. Whereas in the indie space, there is a ton of red ocean in indie now, because people see all these like individual successful games and they're like, oh, I can do that too. And obviously I've seen it. I haven't like made games that whole period. You have made games that entire period. Like shortly after Fez. No, dude, you've been making games for almost 15 years, right? If not longer. Like that's pretty much the entire window of like modern indie development, right? And really over the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's like started to take off in the direction it's going in now, which is lots of developers willing to try slightly more ambitious things that are still within a scope. You used the word reasonable earlier, and I think that's actually pretty apt, but to really say what reasonable is, it's like understanding what you can do with the resources you have, not killing people in the process if at all possible, or like not making that the intent, and following that vision and being willing to, say like cut things out that are not going to make sense, because a lot of indies don't have the capital like to literally eat and continue making those games for as long as it would take to like realize the biggest version of that ambition.
Yeah, it's all things done within the means, right? Like within an indie developer's means, to me seems like an appropriate allocation, because it's out of necessity. I don't want to say that AAA games are going off the rails because they have money to burn or whatever. because I don't know what, like, if they throw $100 million at a game and it doesn't make, I think because the studio usually has other game projects, especially under the umbrella of like a Sony production. There's other things balancing that out. So they can take hits on smaller games, even medium-sized games. I mean, it's a game studio. So, like, they have people at the top who do indeed know. Like, sure, we see a lot of those people that have no idea what they're doing. But the people at the top, they know what a good game looks like. They know it's going to be testing well. They have that information when they see a game. And I think that that's all unseen to us. It seems like they're just throwing things out in front of us to see what works. And I think that, like, the safe bet formulas, they're kind of aware of those things. That's why we get a lot of samey games. Like, we get a lot of games that are single-player, open-world adventure games with high-fidelity graphics, and we get a lot of, like, multiplayer shooter-style games. Or, like, games that are free to play. Because those formulas are there. They know what that is. So I think they make bets on that sort of thing, and they're all pretty safe bets. An indie game, like, doesn't have that. There's not, like, multiple games going on in an indie development to, like, kind of offset that. If one game doesn't do well, even if it was low scoped, the company can still survive. They're literally like, this is their one shot sort of thing. And I think that makes the decisions more appropriate for the type of game. They know their audience. They're more intimate with their audience. They understand, like everyone involved. And also the fact that there's so few people involved in making these games. Like, there's just, there's so much better communication. Whereas, like, you've seen it a million times where, like, the pipeline of a AAA game or a huge budget movie, like, there's something there. You can see kind of the original vision, but everything else after that is just like a game of telephone where, like, by the end it just doesn't sound right, it doesn't look right. Whereas in an indie game, like, communication's so easy between the developers. And also, to my other point, we're not using the technology that we have. It's always pushing forward because people expect that. Indie game developers are pushing older technology, or they're making the best of what they have. Like, indie developers are taking an engine like RPG Maker and really, really laying into it and making some of the most interesting things that you could ever see on that platform. And the same with like with a Unity game or like an Unreal 4 game. Like, we're on Unreal 5 already, and sure, there's like a lot of benefits to that if you want to make like a huge scoped game. But I still believe that if you're on Unreal 4, if you're on Unity 5 or anything like that, or, I don't know how G-Dot or Go-Dot does their things, but any of those old things, you can make it look good. You can make these things look and feel good because it's made to make games. Like, I feel like, I've already ranted about this, but, like, people, they think they need better and better technology to make better and better things. But no, you can, like, creativity breeds in restrictions.
Yeah.
And you get the coolest things in the tightest spaces. And I think that is lost in the AAA space.
Yeah.
It's something we see in indie space.
Dude, 100%. Like, necessity is the mother of invention. And Ubisoft, a company that has $1.3 billion in debt assets, somehow doesn't see necessity as part of their design process. I guess maybe now they're possibly opening up to it, like the new Prince of Persia, Rogue Prince, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, they're dabbling. They're reaching in their old bag of IPs.
Yeah, they're reaching in, and they're giving IP to, I think, Evil Empire is the name of the studio. So they're giving the IP to another studio and just seeing what sticks. But they've already created this albatross of a problem for themselves with $1 billion in debt. And, like, I think this past quarter, they made like $100+ million in net profit, I think. In the quarter before that, I think they lost like $500 million or something.
Damn. That's so sad because they have such a, like, desperate, they have such a desperate look on all their games. Like, their games,
of course,
weekly updates and, like, in-app purchases and just packets and all that's like buying packages and crates and whatever. Like, they have such a desperate look. I guess it makes sense that they're in the hole.
Yeah,
I didn't know that they're in debt, but I knew they were in a bad place.
Well, I'm not going to pretend to know exactly how that works, like how that debt's leveraged, how incoming capital, kind of makes that all work. But still, like, that's a fucking lot of money. And of course, their design decisions are going to be motivated by that, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is people are not resonating with those design decisions anymore. You have more educated game players who want a diversity in the kind of experiences that they're playing, even if they do play the same kind of game over and over. I mean, that was evident with like Call of Duty Vanguard. It was the worst selling Call of Duty, I think, like in years or something, since Black Ops 3 or 4, something like that. And that's coming from a player base that has sold more or less similar games on an
same thing
annual
every
basis.
year.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me that people just accept the same thing year over year.
Well,
like, oh, another Marvel movie, sure, I'll eat that. Another Call of Duty shooter, sure, I'll eat that. Another Assassin's Creed, yeah, I'll have that too. Like, it's crazy to me that people just want it's just such a foreign concept to me. Like, I understand when people want simple things because it's more relaxing, it's easier to digest. They don't want like a horror game usually. If they're, they have a job and they got to get home late and they want something to relax to, whatever. Like, I understand most people, they want that, but like to just reach back into the same old trough for like another Spider-Man game, another Ubisoft Assassin's Creed thing, like I can't. Like,
people
it's so
have been playing
RuneScape
for 17 years and World of Warcraft for 20. Like.
But like, I was actually, they just did the PlayStation. This will date the podcast a little bit, so. But I just watched the PlayStation Next, or what do they call it? Just what do they call those things?
Oh my God.
PlayStation
Showcase. What the hell
do
do they call that thing? That's how little the branding matters on these events.
It's their stream or whatever. For
Yeah.
It's not the big stream, but it's the monthly. They do it
the
pre-Keeley, right?
The pre-Keeley stream.
Yeah. And in the comments, I was reading the comments. Of course, like, it's cute. I have a smile on my face the whole time reading the comments. But it was like during the countdown, because I was excited to watch. I'm still waiting for Onimusha, obviously. Onimusha remake. But I was reading the comments, and I was so surprised to see how many people just wanted game that already exists, insert number here, or property that's very familiar, like Spider-Man. Like I just want Spider-Man 4. I just want God of War 5. I just want, like, they want the same thing over and over again because it's so easy. It was just crazy to me how, like, little you see in the comments, like, I can't wait for new IPs. Like, people it's almost like we've been trained to look forward to the same old things from these studios, and it becomes the safe bet. Like, we're going to see another Spider-Man thing. We're going to see another God of War thing. We're going to see another whatever thing. And I want to see the Onimusha thing. I want the same old thing. So, like, it's funny that that's like what people's aspirations are. It's so few people want something new and fresh and different. And funny enough, that presentation showed off a lot of new and different things, because I think they're promoting a lot more like Korean and Chinese and Japanese well, not Japanese because they've already been producing a lot of stuff, but like there's a push for Korean games now. Ever since I think the government was like, yeah, we want to put more money into that because of how successful this other game was, and Chinese games as well. We're seeing a lot more of. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I don't know what my point was there, but yeah, people want the same old thing from these studios that enjoy putting out the same old thing, but better looking.
No, for sure, and that is like this weird trap that the industry has fallen into, where the diversity and new experiences is now coming from this groundswell of smaller scale developer, like developers with lesser resources than historically successful AAA publishers and developers.
Oh, you know what also came to mind? More on the topic that you brought up originally, which is just like the tendencies of the AAA industry versus like what we usually see with indie developers and stuff. Something that I learned about Nintendo is, like, you'll have examples that are pretty frequent in their pipeline where someone who worked on the original Kirby game is still working on Kirby games. Someone who worked on the original Mario games is still working on the original the new Mario games. And this is a trend that is like prolific in Nintendo specifically. And it is something that is so devoid in the AAA space with other game companies.
Yeah. Dude,
because of this whole like firing and hiring and laying off and doing all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's more cost efficient, and that's why we get AAA games with amateur mistakes in them, because there are IP amateurs working on these games. Like people have no idea about the property that never started on the property, right? Like I don't know. That's like another weird little caveat to AAA games. You're getting people making sequels that they shouldn't be working on. That
Dude,
the people who really made it were fired earlier.
It's so funny because that actually Nintendo has been able to make that specific thing work so well for them, where they will not just retain endemic knowledge, but they will cultivate it. And the reason I say that is because you can look at studios like Ubisoft and Bethesda, both really good examples, where the director for Assassin's Creed worked on a whole bunch of future Assassin's Creeds, and those projects were varying in quality, pretty much after Assassin's Creed 2. Black Flag is largely celebrated, and I think Brotherhood as well. Origins? I don't know. But it started to go from okay, going great, and then the quality just got super rocky. And in the case of Bethesda's super interesting because they've actually had a policy similar to Nintendo's where they try to retain people over the course of all these projects.
Yeah, even musician.
Yeah,
the same
totally.
musician for these projects.
A reason for that is Bethesda makes Bethesda games, but the way in which Bethesda makes games and the specific tooling that they used are both extremely unique to Bethesda. The problem, though, is that Bethesda has rested on its laurels. And unlike Nintendo...
I like the little smirk you had when you said that. Oh, they have done a dirty.
I mean, they dude, Fallout New Vegas is one of my favorite games of all time. I really enjoyed Fallout 3 when it came out.
And that's a separate studio, isn't it?
I mean, but yeah, right.
Obsidian
Oblivion made New Vegas, right? But they had to use Bethesda's tooling. And the point there is that same tooling was used for Skyrim and was used for Fallout 4 and Fallout 76 and Starfield. And Starfield might have looked fine, but as a game, it suffered from the exact same kind of design rot or inability to properly scope what actually mattered that Senua's Saga also suffered from. And it was because oh, go ahead.
I wanted to say from my point of view, because we're really reaming on Senua's Saga, but I honestly feel like that game is what they wanted it to be. I don't think that they were
totally
shooting for Thor Ragnarok.
Dude, 100%.
Maybe it didn't perform like Microsoft wanted, but I think that's the game they wanted to make, and it's just not for everyone. That's the simple
yes, exactly. The point is, the kind of game that they were making might not have been the game that Game Pass needed, that Microsoft needed, or that Ninja Theory needed to make. Right? Well, that's really the thing. And if that's the case, why are they even making this game for Xbox? Why not make it for... I mean, I know they're an Xbox game studio, but it doesn't fit with the strategy at all.
I honestly think that it's a vestige of Xbox buying these studios to get more different types of games, to throw shit at the wall and see what sticks.
But they don't... I know we've talked about this before, but they don't even use the fucking the billions of dollars in profit that Microsoft as a company generates every fucking quarter. They don't use that to hedge their bets by investing in a wider array of studios, in a wider array of types of projects. And instead, they're consolidating and distilling their vision and their strategy down even further when they need to be going in the opposite direction. And it's just, it's
more
buck
diverse.
Wild, dude, 100%. And PlayStation is only not falling into this trap because they're lucky, and B, the people who have stuck with their franchises have continued to show that they would be willing to stick with those franchises. if the shoe ever drops on that, Sony is right and proper fucked. And they're already closing studios and laying people off just because it fits within the macro climate of the games industry right now.
Yeah,
like,
that's just the kind of the atmosphere we have now.
It's insane, man. Like, we're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And there seems to be no end in sight because, like, obviously we're seeing the lagging decision making being realized now because these calls were made years ago. But I have zero confidence at this point that Microsoft and, again, all these larger publishers and developers that have been struggling as of late are going to understand what the problem truly is. This pull quote from Lars Wingefors is very telling of that as well. I think there probably needs to be a part two of like how capital and like the new wave of games is kind of intertwined, because everything that we've talked about has created this opportunity for newer kinds of games, newer kinds of developers, newer models for games, and newer ways for there to be connection between support and developers. There's so much to unpack there too. But it's a really exciting time, and we should get to your topic before I just end up talking for.
I thought we were doing your topic for the whole way.
No, I mean, we could switch to yours now, because I think it would be a whole other like discussion.
Well, I also wanted to say before we leave, if
Okay.
we have to leave, I wanted to say I also think Senua's Sacrifice, because like I followed Ninja Theory since I knew about them when they made Hellblade, or what is it, Heavenly Sword. Like that was the first big game that I knew them by. And they make a type of game. They make a type of game that's very like theatrical. I wouldn't call it cinematic. It's theater. They really wanted to do like virtual theater for those games. And like, I mean, PS3 was a tough console to put games on anyway, because not a lot of people had a PS3 for various reasons. But there's definitely something there outside of just being a God of War ripoff that a lot of people see it as. Like, I saw a lot in that game. I really am endeared to that game. And Enslaved as well, another great game from that studio. The Senua, I want to say Senua Saga, but it's just, it's Hellblade, the Hellblade Saga. So the Hellblade Saga is right in there with that like theater kind of vibe. And I think that worked for them for a long time. And it's weird. It was weird. I was actually surprised to learn, I just learned hearing about the game's release that they're under Microsoft. Because for me, they've always been a Sony thing, and they've been operating just fine, doing their little art house things. And now that they're under the Microsoft umbrella, they're reaching Microsoft's audience. You're getting a lot of types of gamers that are making these associations to like console wars and like comparing things that shouldn't be compared. And so I think that they're maybe they marketed it this way. I think the perception of Senua Saga was basically the God of War killer or something. I'm afraid that that's what people were thinking.
Yeah.
Like, it's Xbox's God of War because, it's got the Nordic mythology in it. And that's me doing a voice of an idiot. Because
no, for sure. They had so much unfair expectation put against them.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why there's like you're getting players that shouldn't be playing this game.
Yeah.
Like, you're convincing people that don't like apples to eat apples. And it's just like, those games operate fine in their own space, in their own niche. There are people that love that game, love all the things that they do for those games, because it's very character driven. It's very unique, very theatrical, I would say, and it looks cinematic. So I think just being like, this is part of my frustration, is that like a lot of these great studios, Arcane included, make fine games on their own. They've made great games before, and then suspicious, they get bought by Microsoft. Now Microsoft's kind of pulling the strings, pushing deadlines, doing whatever they do. It's too much of a coincidence that these great studios made Meatballs this time around. Like, Bethesda, sure, but like Bethesda usually hits their mark. Yeah. Also, like, this is a quick turnaround for a Bethesda game. Like, how long were they working on this game? compared to how long they worked on Oblivion or Skyrim. Like I feel like
I think they were
like,
working
sure,
on
maybe
Starfield for 6 years because I'm pretty sure pre-pro happened during Fallout 76.
yeah, I remember they were doing like envisioning for a while when they announced it. They were doing envisioning for like a couple years while they're still working on Fallout.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I wouldn't be surprised to know that game was a bit rushed. I wouldn't be surprised to find that Redfall was a bit rushed. I just wouldn't be surprised to find that these things weren't given the time they needed or given like the pushes in the right direction that they would have naturally gotten elsewhere. Because it's crazy that we live in a world where Arcane Studios is no more. Arcane Austin is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is insane. They've made some of the most pivotal like stealth action first-person shooter games in history. And because they didn't make the cut under Microsoft, they're just gone now. It's like, what the fuck? Yeah, like Dishonored 2.
No one has made the cut under Microsoft.
And it's like starting to sound like a you problem, you know? It's starting to sound like a them problem.
Dude,
like
Sony's doing the exact same shit with their child studios as well. So,
are they really?
Yeah. I mean, not to the same degree, but like Media Molecule, right? With Dreams, like what
I mean, Media Molecules still exist.
Yeah, Media Molecule still exists, but I mean, it's a shell of itself at this point. And if they were
that's the thing though. Like I wouldn't call the closure of a studio equivalent to them just shutting off servers for an online game. Because I know Media Molecule is going to be doing something. They're going to be making something.
It's not 101. It's more of what the representation of these strategies is, which is to
that's the thing.
dissuade
it's all under
the
the
more
same
experimental, the smaller scope kind of game. The more of like, here's some constraints, do whatever you want within these constraints. It feels like the strings are being pulled much tighter by the powers that be now. And this is the underlying
This is the thing,
problem.
though. Like, this might be just me being a Sony fanboy, like deep down, right? Because I've been with Sony I had a PS1 and then all the way till PS3, and even now, like I watch the PlayStation stuff. Like, it's always interesting to me to see because to me, Sony, maybe they don't seem like they're innovating because all their games are kind of like pushing realism and stuff, and all kind of look samey. But I'm always kind of delighted and surprised to see the different IPs that come out of those presentations from Sony, and I'm always delighted to see like old favorites come back from me. Whereas like I feel like even if I was in the shoes of a Microsoft fan, like I've been following Microsoft my whole life, it seems like Microsoft isn't delivering in either of those categories. New interesting things at a high budget, or bringing back interesting old IP, or just familiar old IP. Like Halo. Like what the fuck? There's been one Halo game in the past like however many years.
Yeah,
and
but
like
it was
meanwhile,
Infinite, and it was, oh my god, Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite was maybe the start of the end, of the current end, wherever this
honestly, man,
this might end.
I saw like a couple, maybe like 5-6 years ago, maybe longer. There was a presentation I watched from Microsoft where they showed nothing. I think it was when when they maybe announced Scalebound. And that swath of games that got canceled.
Scalebound.
This was a long time ago.
Yeah, I've not heard
Scalebound is just a game that never came out.
Yeah.
It's a very promising, very, very interesting like game coming out of Microsoft from the developers of, I think, Bayonetta and stuff like that. Something along those lines. Or maybe Devil May Cry devs or something like that. It had a lot of promise. Very interesting. There's dragons and fighting and swords and stuff, and it's very magical. It was around this time I remember thinking to myself, man, they're showing a lot of like concept trailers, a lot of CG trailers during this presentation. I was like, this is weird. And I mean, what's his name was still like head of Xbox. It was still Phil Spencer back then. So maybe he has something to do with it. But like at this time, I was like thinking to myself, man, these games, they're not showing any gameplay. Like I'm used to seeing gameplay. I'm used to seeing like something past a concept during these presentations. But it was a particularly empty presentation. I wish I knew which one in particular it was or which couple it was that made me feel this way. But sure enough, soon after, cancellation on all these promising, interesting titles. And it almost seemed like that E3 or that presentation conference was made simply to combat the amazing lineup that year that Sony was delivering with their interesting and unique new IP and new trailers and because there was a time back then when they had their famous like presentation, right? That was just like kicking everyone's ass. They did that like, now it's commonplace to see these types of presentations, but they did just a no nonsense trailer end like E3 thing, right? I think it was around that time. And then you get this Microsoft thing where they're just posting these like, I want to call it like paper video games, like not paper towns, but paper video games, like fake game trailers just to make it look like there's stuff going on. But sure enough, they canceled all those projects. They don't exist. Like it was vapid vaporware that they were pushing. And I just, ever since then, it's hard for me to just think of like a property that's come out of Xbox that's been prolific. It's been something that kind of has legs and that stood around. You know, maybe it's just because I'm not really looking there, but I don't see examples there. I honestly don't know. Like I know they have Gears of War, but that's like a decade old now. The newest Gears of War, and like what else is out there?
Dude,
for Xbox?
I
just
don't
feel
know.
like they're not pushing that.
Oblivion is almost single-handedly carrying that brand right now.
Oblivion. What is Oblivion?
Oblivion or Obsidian. I think I said Oblivion earlier
Obsidian.
too. Obsidian.
You did, yeah.
I got confused with all the Skyrim discussion.
Yeah.
Obsidian is like carrying forward the bar of quality now that I don't know. I don't even know which. Dude, I'm so curious which Microsoft.
Let me take my tinfoil
hat
hat off as well.
Okay.
I know what I sound like.
No. I mean, it makes sense. Like, Microsoft is trying to compete at a game that they historically have not needed to. And the thing about Game Pass, if that's the go forward model for them, is you need games to be on Game Pass. And I know when they shut the studios down, it was like, oh, you need developers to make games. It's like, yes, that is true, but you need more than that. You can't just have 6 games carrying your entire service. And like Minecraft is the biggest thing that Microsoft has. And you can buy Minecraft without, you don't need Game Pass for Minecraft, you know? So yeah, dude, it's just like everything that they are doing just seems antithetical to their strategy. And I know this all kind of started with money and we sort of ended up here, but their allocation of resources just seems so wildly incorrect. And these bets that they are taking are contextual to what other players in the space are doing and not what they need to do for themselves, thinking that these other strategies are going to be the thing that gets their service the momentum that it needs, when it couldn't be further from the truth of that being non-conducive to them.
Yeah, unfortunately, like you mentioned strategy, and when I think strategy in Xbox, I think of like a scramble. I don't know what their strategy has been, because I believe that their strategy was selling consoles, and that's not like lucrative, right?
Yeah.
Like selling games is the lucrative part. So, and I think so for a while they were trying to sell consoles, and that just wasn't working. Like Sony makes profit not on consoles but games, so that's why their games are so like they're coming out. And
I think
that's why they don't care
is a
who
loss leader, just for context. Like I'm pretty sure that's the case universally.
I just don't. I don't have a lot of like. It's hard for me to read what Microsoft was going for by not releasing games for their platform. Like they're kind of just going for this like middling, like there's plenty of third-party games on Xbox, but just as well they're on PlayStation and PC as well. So like and their exclusives are soon the generation who grew up with Halo are going to be dead.
Okay, I have the full list of. Oh my god, dude! They haven't even. Microsoft hasn't even updated the Xbox Game Studios website, so they still show 4 of the studios that they shut down.
Oh, no. No, that's such a bad look.
That's pretty terrible. I can't believe that, actually. Okay,
so they still got like Redfall stuff up there?
Yeah, dude, they still have... I
mean, it's still a game you can buy.
They have Arcane, they have Roundhouse, they got Tango and Alpha Dog. And
that's rough.
Wow. Okay, so they have 343. World's Edge. I don't even know what World's Edge is. Oh, Age of Empires. Okay. The Coalition, which has not produced a game since Gears 5, I believe. Maybe they had that Gears Tactics thing. Compulsion, which has not made a game in a cool minute.
What's Compulsion? What do they make?
made We Happy Few, and
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that was Microsoft's.
I think Compulsion got acquired after We Happy Few, I believe.
Mm.
They haven't made a game in a while. Double Fine, which is one of the greatest game developers on the entire planet, but they haven't done anything since Psychonauts 2. Is Double Fine going to carry your Game Pass strategy? The Initiative, I don't even remember what the Initiative is. In Exile, which is great. Mojang, Ninja Theory, Obsidian, Playground, cool. Oh yeah, they have Rare still. Turn 10 and Undead Labs, and then Bethesda.
Yeah, where's Banjo-Kazooie? Like,
Rare made Sea of
they
Thieves.
really need to. They need to start because soon those IP aren't going to mean anything to people. You know,
dude,
that's how bad it's getting.
This is not. This is a great lineup of studios for the most part. However, this isn't going to carry a multi-billion-dollar subscription business. And given how little they do with publishing and with like any kind of real meaningful third-party differentiation, like, this is insane, dude. It's so fucking crazy that this is where the money's going. So, yeah, I don't know, man.
Tragic.
I don't know. There's definitely more to unpack here from a different perspective, and I would love to get into that next time, because we've been at this for about an hour now.
We need a business insider.
Yeah.
To let us know how wrong we are about all these things.
I yield the rest of my time, Senator Powell.
Oh,
until
we've been talking for an hour already. Should
we've
we
been
just,
talking for
we should wrap
we
up?
should definitely end. But I think
let's just wrap up.
Next week, maybe you'll get the floor, and we'll see if we have time for my part too.
We can do a double next week, since we've now made up the other half from last week.
Okay, that sounds good.
But that was fine. I like that. That was good. A little. I'll have to pick a topic that's a little cozier next time, because we do get into games industry talk, and that's a very like dire.
All right, you pick a cozy one, and then I'll bring a dire one after.
Oh, okay. So it's an uphill fight.
Okay, maybe I'll just say, you know what? I'll table the rest of this conversation for another time, because I'll have even more
spread it out
perspective by then too. Okay.
There'll be more. Yeah, there'll be more news as well by then.
Something cozy. Okay.
I brought a cozy one today, but we'll have to just wait.
Okay. All right. I'm excited to see it.
Cozy one about my past.
Ooh. Okay. Should we close out here then?
Let's wrap up. Who are you? Where can people find you?
I am Zach. You can find me on LinkedIn at Zachary Snader. I generally don't use other socials for myself, but you can follow my game studio, Wildkind, at wildkind.gg, or Wildkind Creations on most of the social platforms that matter, like Instagram and TikTok and such. Cool. Buddy, how about yourself?
Yes, you can find me. Zach may call me Buddy, but my real name is Winston. You can find me on pretty much any social media that's not TikTok, I guess. I'm on Pinterest, Tumblr, or Instagram, Twitter, Reddit even, and I have a Patreon. So you can follow me there at Acornbringer. If you'd like to find out more about the game I'm making, Of Love and Eternity, check out my Patreon. Always looking for some support there. It's been nice to see all the support I've been getting. And yeah, look it up. And thanks for listening as well.
Yes, thank you all for listening. And until next time, this has been Story Players.